Tony Tata, who was appointed Secretary of the North Carolina Department of Transportation by Governor McCrory January of this year. Tony is retired from the U.S. Army as a Brigadier General and brings to his position more than 3 decades of public service as a military officer and a public school system leader. He has a history of successfully leading and transforming large, complex organizations with vast responsibility, and his new role with the North Carolina Department of Transportation certainly will be no different. Most recently, he served as a superintendent of the Wake County Public School System, leading the state's largest school district of 18,000 employees and over 150,000 students to record academic heights. During his time in the military, General Tata's last combat tour was in Afghanistan, where he served as Deputy Commanding General of the United States Forces from 2006 to 2007. Throughout his career, General Tata planned and implemented multiple operations involving complex transportation and infrastructure challenges ranging from multi-mode operations involving ports, airfields, rail, and highways to designing and implementing extensive infrastructure plans in developing countries. And now you can understand why he's now Secretary of Transportation. In the past 5 years, General Tata has successfully managed large budgets ranging from $4.5 billion in the Department of Defense counter roadside bond program to $1.25 billion in the Wake County school system. Tony received his Bachelor of Science at the United States Military Academy at West Point. He has a Master of Arts in International Relations at Catholic University of America and a Master of Military Art and Science in Strategic Planning at the U.S. Army School of Advanced Military Studies, and was the National Security Senior Fellow at Harvard University Kennedy School of Government. General Tata and his wife, Jody, have 2 children, Brooke and Zachary, and please welcome Secretary Tony Tata.
Thanks for that long and exhausting introduction. I got something to get that shrunk down a little bit, but you did excellent with it. Thank you very much. It's great to be back here in Greensboro, and I remember, when was it, late January at your annual convention I spoke. How many of you were at that? So I know not to use the same jokes, or at least tell them the same way if I do. It's a lot of time. It's a very short period of time, but a lot of things have happened in the last 4 months that I look forward to giving you an update on, and then really to the message that the governor, who is an absolutely fantastic individual to work for, the message that he has given me and the tasks that he has given me, they haven't changed, but we have begun to implement some of the things. We've been working real hard and trying to get things done, and this is the test. I talk with my hands a lot. I'm Italian, so I'm going to try not to knock that T over there. But I like to start out by telling a little bit about myself and my background so that you understand where I'm coming from, and then talk about the larger strategic picture. And as those who were at the annual Greater Greensboro event in January know, I'm the son of 2 public school teachers born and raised in Virginia Beach, and then went to, my father is actually the son of Italian immigrants. So my grandparents immigrated from Italy and to Detroit, and my grandfather was a brick mason, scratching out a living up in Detroit. And my mom's from the Blue Ridge Mountains near Charlottesville, Virginia. And my dad was a good football player and baseball player, and so UVA recruited him, and he turned down actually an offer to join the Detroit Tigers, and came to Virginia, where then he was drafted by the Lions, and he played football for a year, and then he said, in typical fashion, he said, I got fat, so I got cut. So, but he's a paragon of health today. But anyway, so he wanted to coach, and he went to UVA's to get a master's in education, and met my mother there who was teaching, and the rest is history, as they say. So and the reason I sort of lay out, my mother has 41 years public school, 2 terms on the Virginia Beach School Board. My father, 30 years in the Virginia General Assembly, 30 years as a teacher and a high school football coach. And so that's sort of my framework. I got an older brother, went to the Naval Academy, and a younger sister who, you think about it, my brother's at the Naval Academy, I'm at West Point, and both my parents by that time were guidance counselors, so they knew how to get kids into college free. And not only free, but where they pay you actually to go. And so I get this call from my sister, and she's crying, saying, I'm at West Point, you know, and Dad's trying to make me go to the Air Force. And Air Force, what? And then it clicked for me, Air Force Academy. It's like the one, they're just putting notches in their belts. You know, you got Naval Academy, you got West Point, now we got Air Force Academy. And she actually had an appointment to the Air Force Academy, and she said, you got to call Dad and tell him not to do this. I'm like, yeah, like I've got that kind of power, you know, to the football coach whose famous words are drink water and put ice on it. But anyway, she ended up going to University of Virginia. That was the only cell I had. My sister ran a 442 mile in high school, and so I said, don't you want her to go to your alma mater, Dad, where you were an outstanding athlete? And he backed down from the Air Force Academy thing and let her go on a track scholarship. As long as it was free, it was okay. So, but anyway, so that, I went to West Point, and I tell all my, where's Mike NC State grad, right? Okay, I tell all my, I got 14 division engineers, 13 are NC State civil engineering graduates, 1 is Clemson. And I tell all my engineers that I went to the first engineering school in the United States. George Washington in 1802 built West Point specifically to graduate engineers to create roads and bridges for the new nation that was born in the Revolution in 1776. So that and $5 gets me a Starbucks coffee. So, anyway, my trek through the military, what I quickly learned as an infantryman and a paratrooper was that leading those kinds of organizations, we have what we call combined arms teams, and combined arms means you'd have infantry who are your ground soldiers, you'd have engineers that often would pave the way for you or would construct things for you. You'd have air defense, you had a multifunctional team, military, police, and all of that. And as the commander, I had to integrate all of that combat power. And so at the lieutenant level, you may have just a few of these people helping you out, 40 or 50 that you're leading, and as a brigadier general, as a deputy commanding general of troops in Afghanistan, there are 35,000 soldiers, about half of which were under my command, and the engineers were one of those things that one of those groups that I had. There were 2 engineer groups, and that's the largest engineer formation there is. And we were charged with infrastructure development in Afghanistan. And we were building roads, building airports. I told a story about a true story about building an airport during the January dinner, and building schools, and the infrastructure development piece was so important, not only in Afghanistan, but every operational deployment I've been on, whether, from Afghanistan to Iraq to, the Philippines, where I went as a lieutenant, and everything in between. It was always about building something to improve the lives of the people that you were there to protect. And that theme has sort of resonated, that combat is about 85% building stuff and 15% getting shot at and trying to stay alive. So that part pretty much, when you're getting shot at, it seems like it's 100%, you're getting shot at. But there used to be a term called low intensity conflict. I'm here to tell you there's no such thing. If you're getting shot at, it's pretty high intensity. So But anyway, so as I went through all of that, and as a battalion commander, I spent several assignments down at Fort Bragg in the 90s, and then had lived in Fayetteville. I had owned a house for about 12, 13 years down there, and then went to Fort Campbell, Kentucky, where I was with the 101st Airborne. The 101st and the 82nd hate each other, and there's this big rivalry. It's kind of like two football teams, and so here I come traipsing into Fort Campbell, Kentucky as a Fort Bragg, North Carolina guy, and they're all looking at me like I have three eyes and that kind of thing. And I said, yeah, but we jump down at Fort, but they don't jump at Fort Campbell. They have helicopters, and so it's a kind of a macho thing that being a paratrooper. But and then as a 10th Mountain soldier, the real golden triangle for any soldier in the 18th Airborne Corps, the Rapid Deployment Corps for the Army, is 10th Mountain, 101st, 82nd. So I was privileged to be able to serve in all of those divisions, and they're the ones who get deployed the most. And certainly the last 10 years in combat, everybody's been deployed a lot. But before that, it was 10th Mountain, 101st, 82nd, kind of on this continuous cycle. And we have a lot to be proud of here in North Carolina about with the 82nd Airborne Division and the Marines at Camp Lejeune that are really out there doing our nation's bidding. So with all of that said, after about 28 years, I decided to transition to get in this peaceful, idyllic world of education. As a kid, I was watching my parents as teachers, and they had summers off, and it was all great. And so my first assignment was at the eye of the hurricane, and as the chief operating officer of Washington, D.C. Public Schools with Michelle Reedy. And, that was, Ashley was there with me, and that was insane. They had people rioting and chanting outside the central office building, because she let some teachers go and that kind of thing, and then get hired down at Wake County, and that was peaceful and idyllic as well. People talk about my last combat tour, I get a little confused when but we did. We had and Ashley worked with me there as well, and we, for the first time in the history of Wake County Public Schools, last year, our low-income students broke the statewide average. First time in the history. So we are moving on the right track there in Wake County with regard to education. And I understand Mo Green is such a good superintendent. Y'all are so fortunate to have Mo here in Guilford County. And and I actually said that at the January event as well. And all of this leads up to, for me, as I made the transition to be Secretary of Transportation, I kind of looked back and said, I could not have had any better preparation for this position. As I think about all of the service in the military and then service in education, it really is about public service. When I look at the role models that my parents have been, decades of public service, and someone said it, for not a lot of money. I mean, there's school board members in here somewhere. My mother had served 2 terms, and she said, I've never worked so hard in my life for so little pay. And my father, 15 terms as a state representative in Virginia, where, again, you get very little pay. And so the idea of what they have done, and they are still, to this day, my role models. And so I think about the opportunity to serve when the governor called me and asked me to do this position. I was like, yes, I'm honored and humbled, really, because I did not know the governor prior to December of last year. I'd never met him. And so for someone to put that kind of trust, faith, and confidence in me, I have a lot to live up to, a lot of high expectations that I've set for myself, and I will endeavor to do those, to do that and meet the high expectations that everybody should have for all of the cabinet members. And so as the governor and I talked about transportation, his 3 primary vectors he wanted me on are to improve customer service, to develop a 25-year infrastructure plan, and to be a more efficient government organization, because we all know that you know, organizations that kind of lay fallow kind of get bigger and bigger and bigger, and instead of trying to find efficiencies. Like that team right now going through Lean Six Sigma training. But to start with customer service, he really wanted me to start with DMV, and so that's what we've done, but it's more broad than that. It's great to hear the support that Mike has, because it's that kind of relationship that I want our division engineers to have with their community. And so, you know, thanks, Mike, for working so hard and being that kind of leader that has those relationships that people feel like they can turn to you and say, hey, what about X? And you actually get a response, and it's not the big bad DOT steamrolling over something. You know, at the end of the day, that may have to happen, but you know, if it can be avoided. And I'll tell you, when I was coming up to make the speech in Greenboro in January, I'd received a call a week earlier from a businessman saying, hey, you guys have put some orange flags in my on my property, and they go across a rail spur, and I've got hazardous chemicals, just FYI. And I'm thinking, okay, well, and plus nobody told me, and you know, so it's different division, not mine. And so I stop by this guy's headquarters, and I look at their plan, I look at where we put the flags, I look at what we were doing, I'm like, there's got to be a better way to do this. So I get with my chief deputy, Jim Trogdon. I said, hey Jim, how about taking a look at this? He calls the guy, brings him in, gets our engineers together, and lo and behold, there's a way to do it without even going on his property, and it was cheaper. And it's that kind of thing that I think the governor is really getting out. It's about public service and being, you know, listening to the businessmen and women and the citizens of the state, and not just, hey, we can do that, we do it because we can. We make it hard because we can. That's actually a saying from the 82nd. But then DMV is a whole different story. There's a culture there that we're working on. The very first thing that I said to our new commissioner, James Fort, and the team is, look, there's some technological changes that we need to make. There's some accessibility changes that we need to make. Some are easier to do than others. Others will take more time. You know, if we're going to do a technology change, we got to put out a request for proposals and information and all of that, and we got to work our way through that. We got a 20-year-old COBOL system right now. Colleges don't even teach computer programmers COBOL today. I mean, I learned COBOL in Fortran at West Point, at the very first engineering school in the United States. So, so we've got some road to hoe with the technological thing. My guidance has been, if I can bank with my bank 24/7, I ought to be able to DMV 24/7. I got to come in the initial time to my bank and show who I am, set up my checking account, and from then on it's great. I can do everything. I don't even have to go to the bank. And so it ought to be like that with DMV. The other piece, so they're working on that. The other piece is DMV before March was open 9 to 5 Monday through Friday. That's a business. It's not a retail business. It's 9 to 5. And so what do you got to do if you want to work on your license or whatever, or get your renewal? You got to take off from work, or you got to take off from school, depending on who you are. And so my guidance has been, nobody should have to take off from work or take off from school to go do their business at DMV. And I want to start the first Saturday in March. Well, the first plan they brought back to me started in July. And I'm like, well, March starts with an M. I may not have graduated first in my class, but I graduated. And so then the second plan they brought back started in April. And I'm like, March still starts with an M. And so they started March 2nd. that first Saturday, and I said, just give me 3 DMVs and let's pilot it. Let's get this thing moving. And they did one. I said, give me one east of 95, one in between 95, 85, one west of 85. So we did Greenville and North Raleigh and West Charlotte. And this past week, we've added, 2 weeks ago, we added Durham, Fayetteville, and North Charlotte. And this, in 2 weeks, we're going to add about 7 or 8 more. And then by the end of June, we will have 30-ish in place. And the standard is about 90 to 95% of North Carolinians ought to be within 40 miles, or what we consider about an hour's drive, of a Saturday DMV. And so what have we done so far? Since we first opened that first weekend in March, we've done over 2,100 transactions at those 3 DMVs, plus the 3 that just opened last weekend, or 2 weekends ago. So that's fairly significant. All of them are operating at their maximum capacity. So the demand is there. And that's what we were looking, hey, if we did Saturday DMVs, would anybody show up? Well, I've been, and the lines are wrapped at 7:30 in the morning around the building. So the demand is there. The other thing is that these DMVs are opening an hour before 9, so they're open at 8, and they're staying open till 6. And that's over 2,000 transactions that we've done in those hours. So I've got them measuring what's the demand load 8 to 9, what's the demand load 5 to 6. People coming in before work, people coming in after work. And so we're going to take a look at this, and do we need to open earlier? Do we need to open later? Do we need to do both? And providing accessibility is the key thing for us, and to be more retail oriented, so people don't have to take off of worker school and be less 9 to 5. The other thing is we've got a lot of high impact events around the state, like State Fair, that kind of thing. We have a mobile unit that we've developed, and we're going to take that mobile unit to different events around the state, and it also helps message some safety things and that kind of thing. So that's what we're doing. That's an update on the customer service, the tangible things that we're doing. It's great to have all these platitudes and things that we're saying out there, but those are things that we're doing. We've got real results. We're getting good feedback on that program, and I look forward to, we hired former Bank of America Global Technology Integrator, Dave Ulmer from Charlotte, to be our IT genius, and he is already off and running, and he is going to help transform our information technology piece for the other half of it. So that's the customer service piece, 25-year infrastructure plan. We're taking a hard look at really 3 fundamental things before you can actually get into talk about projects. You got to have the framework. And so what's your funding, right? So we have motor fuels tax, we have DMV fees, and we have the highway use tax, right? So motor fuels tax, you got more drivers, but they're driving more efficient cars. So our revenue stream is about 2% annually going down on motor fuels tax. Our DMV fees have not been updated for 7 or 8 years, and because we extended the time for renewal of driver's licenses, we're right in a dip year where it was 5 and now it's 8, and so where people would be renewing, we're not getting that cash flow. So that's down. And then the highway use tax, we're well off the pre-recession highs. People stopped buying vehicles and they stopped buying more expensive vehicles. So now, as the tax revenue has come in off of that, it's starting to uptick back, but it's not close to its pre-recession highs. So all 3 funding streams are down or flat, and we don't anticipate that they'll ever come back up, because the motor fuels tax is going to continue. That's our big ticket item. That's going to continue to decrease in revenue. And so the real problem we have is 1.2 million newcomers expected to move into North Carolina, a lot right here in the Triad, and 1.6 billion, that's over 10 years, 1.6 billion, if you do the math out of that 2% decrease per annually, and you factor in the new people coming, we're expecting to lose over 1.6 billion in revenue if we do nothing. And so upward trend in population creates infrastructure demand, and downward trend in revenue, and that gap, we're calling that the infrastructure gap. And so we've got a problem that we've got to address. And so how do you address that problem? Well, you can always take a look at new revenue sources. That kind of sounds like, smells like taxes, right? And so that's really not something that we're talking about right now. What we are talking about is finding a way to more efficiently use the money that we have. You know, Governor McCrory's 3 key themes are the economy, education, and efficiency. And within really Department of Transportation is trying to help attack 2 of those with the economy and with efficiency. And so as we look at how we distribute the money and what we're going to do there may be some opportunities to actually increase the number of projects that we do and increase the number of jobs that we get off of those projects to include businesses that are attracted to the area. So that's one area that we're really looking at hard, and should have some things to say in the next week or so about that. And then the third piece is, how do you prioritize projects within the money that you have and how you've distributed that money? And so presently there's criteria out there, and if we distribute the money differently and we prioritize each level differently, then there may be a way to create more jobs or more projects that would lead to more jobs. And so that's really the heart of the strategic plan. And as we talk about strategic planning, you got to talk multimodal here. And you know, you've got the great airport here in Greensboro, and you know, the FedEx and Timco and all of that is happening, Honda Jet and so forth, that's happening at Greensboro. And you've got the rail, and you've got the highways that all converge here. It's a very attractive place for businesses, and so how are we leveraging that, and what more can we do to complete that picture for this triad area that will attract more business? And you know, some of you have heard me say this before, but I've had some businessmen tell me, hey, 85 is too congested and I have to move my business somewhere else unless you can reduce that congestion on 85 because I'm missing my window. And so that's part of what we're looking at with how we distribute the money. There are some key choke points that we really need to get at, and right now under the current system, it's really kind of hard to get at. You know, when we had to fix the Yadkin River Veterans Memorial Bridge, they had to create the mobility fund. So they had to do a workaround just to be able to do something that was a critical infrastructure project. So instead of having to do workarounds, we're looking at fixing the system is the bottom line. And the third piece on being more efficient, you know, I'll tell you that we're selling the state jet. We don't need a jet. And we're going to save about $500,000 a year in operating costs with our airplane fleet. We're turning in empty, vacant positions that haven't been filled for a couple of years. We've taken a 2% cut in our budget, and we're just looking for ways to be more efficient, to include in how we distribute the money that we have. And I would tell you that you know, there are a lot of projects here that are ongoing. I've been out here a couple of times. I was just, Mike Fox and Cheryl McQuarrie just took me around, and we finished up at the airport. It was a very, very good visit, and I've sort of gotten eyes on all the key choke points and projects that are going on out here. And I think you're in excellent hands with Mike. And I'm not going to review every project because I think we've kind of got a feel for what's going on with those projects. And but I will, when I'm done, take your questions. If you got a project-specific thing, I'm happy to have Mike answer that. So, but anyway, I thought I would give you the governor's vision for me and where we're going, and it is one that really has Secretary Decker and I meeting quite frequently, talking, collaborating, and it's one of leveraging infrastructure to try to enhance economic opportunity, to keep people moving ahead, to help people get ahead, and where we are focused in the Department of Transportation is really on providing the best investment and the best place at the best time to help the most North Carolinians. And we want to find a way to do more projects, we think we have, to do more projects sooner so that we can reduce that congestion, we can be an inviting place for business, we can help connect rural areas with economic centers and medical centers and education centers, and connect everybody with our great recreation centers, whether it's the mountains or the ocean or everything in between. Speaking of which, I've done a few Greenway ribbon cuttings, and every time we cut a new one, I get another blip on the map filled in on the ocean mountain to sea trail, which is a great project that we've got going on here, and it's actually fascinating to see how all that's coming together. So lots of things happening all at once, whether it's rail or highways or airports or ports, transit, you name it, it's going on, and we're neck deep in it, and we're trying to make the most positive change that we can. So I appreciate the opportunity to talk to you today, and I'll take any questions that you might have. Thank you.
You've mentioned her. First of all, thank you for your lifelong service to our country. I was at the partnership dinner and was very intrigued with how your view of right-of-way acquisition. The story from Afghanistan there, I think that might be something folks would take some. Maybe we could get you down to the mega site, or can we use that at the airport somewhere?
Well, I'll tell the story if that's the segue. We had a pretty raging fight in one area, and it was sort of in a soft spot where we didn't have a lot of infrastructure. Afghanistan is sort of a fourth world country, and so you either had Kandahar or Bagram, Kandahar in the south, Bagram in the north, and this was right in the middle, and there was no good way to resupply troops, and we were using parachutes left and right to airdrop supplies, and so I told my engineers, let's find a place to build an airfield out there so we can land big cargo planes and offload and resupply troops. And they said okay, and they found suitable land, and I said, all right, let's go talk to the landowner and get this process moving. And so there was a company commander, as a captain, and he drove out there with a couple of tanks, and I had gotten a message from the company commander, I'm a general, here's his captain, and captains are in charge of everything in the Army, and he's like, the last thing I need is a dead general in my battle space, sir, so, be careful. So we came with a couple of Apache gunship helicopters that are hovering over, and, they have rockets and missiles and machine guns, and then, just for good measure, we had a couple of A-10 attack fighter jets circling low overhead, banking hard, making noise and everything. And this was not in an uncontested area, so it was all fully warranted. So I get out there and I'm face to face with this Afghan landowner, and they're pretty savvy people, and so they tell you to talk to the principal, not the interpreter. And so I was pretty good at that, just locking eyes with this guy. But this guy wouldn't look at me. He was looking at the 2 tanks, and he'd look at the 2 Apache gunships, and then he'd look at the 2 A-10s flying overhead with bombs under their wings. And I'm trying to talk to him and say, hey, look, thanks for meeting us out here. And, you know, it was hard that you're kind of screaming at each other over the loud noises of the helicopters and the attack fighter jets. And he's still looking at everything. And I said, do you mind if we build an airfield out here where your land is? And he's actually starting to sweat a little bit. And he said, you can build Disney World here. and how he knew about Disney World, I don't have that is a true story. And we built an airfield there, and that airfield resupplied our troops, and we quelled the insurrection in that area. But so I think that's where you were going with that, right? So, I look forward to bringing that same kind of right-of-way acquisition. We are upgrading our aircraft fleet, as I mentioned. I just told you what we're selling, not what we're buying. So.
Any other questions?
How would you characterize North Carolina's strategy relative to toll roads?
How would I characterize North Carolina's strategy? First of all, that's assuming there is one. And I'm not being cheeky. I don't believe that we have a coherent strategy right now for toll roads. I think what most people would say is that only new projects can be tolled, and that's not a strategy. I think that's just a fact that right now, only things like the Triangle Expressway, I-77 hot lane is not really a toll road, it's a managed lane. And I think going forward, when you hear about the bleak revenue picture, you've got to figure out how you're going to go forward and do more infrastructure than what a decreasing budget will allow you to do. And we have tremendous demand for infrastructure throughout the state. I mean, I just look at all the projects around the Triad area, and it's unbelievable what we've got going on here, and what a great job Mike and Pat and others are doing in trying to get things done in their divisions. So we've got to ask ourselves the tough questions. You know, the Triangle Expressway around near where I live in Cary, that's starting to generate revenue. Now, it's slowly but surely, and part of it, until we link it to 40 in the south, I don't think it's going to do everything that it could do. But I go to Rocky Mount, I go to Smithfield, I go to up and down 95, and I get the, not in my backyard, you're not going to toll 95, because what I say is, I'm not talking about tolling 95. If you're talking about a toll discussion, you got to talk about really an overarching revenue generation. How are we going to do that? Are we looking at public-private partnerships? There's a thing called design, build, finance, operate, and transfer. So that's where a private business person and company could come in and design, build a highway, let's say we want to connect Rocky Mount to Hampton Roads, all right? And we want a highway to tap into that big economic engine up there in Hampton Roads, Virginia. Someone could come in, we could do a deal, design, build, finance, operate, and transfer. Well, that could be a 30-year deal, and we just pay an operating cost for that thing every year, kind of like a mortgage, but it's not debt per se, but it's an operating cost. That is about 34 states are doing that now. You can also help repay that debt if you toll it, and you make it a toll road, and that would lessen the burden on the state. And so there's a lot of design, build, finance, operate, transfer that are toll roads. And I think it's a conversation we need to start having. And that's when I talk about the more efficient way of distributing the funds, The other half of that conversation is, that I think takes longer, is how do we get more revenue? Is it through tolling? Is it through some fee increase? Is it through public-private partnerships? Some combination thereof. So I would say that's a long way of saying I'm not sure. But the strategy, I would summarize it really as one of trying to, that tolling has to be a part, or managed lanes, or whatever we want to call it. Managed lanes have to be a part of the conversation going forward, because the infrastructure revenue is not there if we want to do it. So we're going to reach a tipping point of what are our innovative ways to create infrastructure, and we want to be in front of that tipping point before we tip over. So it's got to be part of the menu of options that you have going forward. But it's not the panacea for everything.
One more question, somebody had one.
What's the future of gas tax? Your ideas on what might
That's a great question. The gas, the motor fuels tax, Virginia eliminated, then added it's 3.5% of wholesale, which is about 20 cents cheaper than what we are. And so the future of motor fuels tax in North Carolina, you've got to consider Virginia the north, South Carolina the south, and they're both 15, 20 cents cheaper per gallon than we are. And so if you're a business owner on 95 or 85, you've got to be a little bit concerned about that, because people are going to fuel up in South Hill, bypass, all the way down to Spartanburg. Or if you're on 95, they'll fuel up in Skippers or Emporia all the way down to Florence. And they'll save, 40, 50 bucks going each way probably as they do their summer vacation. So provided they're not coming into North Carolina. So, we have to take that into consideration with what we're doing. What Virginia did is they lowered the motor fuels tax, but they raised the sales tax. And so it was one of those things where you lower one thing and you increase another, and there can be debated, should be debated. There's a conversation we need to have about how we generate more revenue for our infrastructure, and I think that's just on the horizon. Right now, we're not talking about anything to do with motor fuels tax or any other taxes.
Great.
All right, thank you very much.
I want to make one quick introduction. You heard him refer to Ashley Goolsby, who is responsible for getting him here today. She had the motor running while he was meeting with the governor. So thank you for getting him here once again before I got here. So that was great.